Just a heads up that today's episodes of Thoughts About Feelings talks about some heavier mental health topics. That's probably going to be a common theme, but we want to make sure that you're protected and that if you need resources, they're available. If you're feeling like you don't want to be around, I hope you reach out to a loved one. I hope you reach out to someone and to the resources that we have available. You can call the 988 hotline. You can text if you prefer to text. You can text home to crisis text line at 741-741. And if you want to learn more about mental health, topics like anxiety, depression, dealing with worry, you can go to loveyourmindtoday.org.
With our fabulous friends and Mychal and Blair, we'll think about our feelings everywhere with thoughts about feelings. Thoughts about feelings, yeah!
Hi, I'm Blair Imani, but you might know me as the Smarter in Seconds lady.
And I'm Mychal Threets. You may know me as librarian or library guy. And we decided to launch a podcast called
Thoughts About Feelings.
So we can talk about Thoughts About Feelings.
I think we nailed it that time.
I think so. My name is Mychal Threets. Sometimes I'm called the librarian or library guy. And I am just so happy you're here. From a person who has struggled most of his life, I am so grateful that you are here. I'm so happy to exist at the same time as you. I'm so happy you're here. 369, it's okay to not be fine. It's okay to not be okay. Wherever you're at today, if you're feeling lazy, if you're feeling tired, if you're feeling like you're going to go on an adventure, the happiest day of your life, I am here with you. I am rooting for you. Blair is rooting for you. We are all about thoughts, about feelings, and I can't wait to see you one day. Yes.
Yes. I love that. Thank you so much, Mychal. I'm Blair Imani. And I just want to say, you're really powerful. There are so many ways that we're made to feel powerless right now in this world. We might have big thoughts, big feelings about various things, but just know that while there's a lot of things that are out of our control, there are some things within our control. So I'd like you to focus on a few things that are in your control in this moment. Maybe just the volume. Even if it's just that. That's one thing we got on our team, right? The volume button.
Yes.
But let's go ahead and get started with our first episode.
Wonderful. I cannot wait.
So people know us from the internet. Folks know you from libraries. I think we should just start out. What has it been like with your rise to social media stardom, Mychal?
That is a great question. I cannot wait to hear your answer. I always tell people I do not like my rise to social media stardom, if you call it that. I always tell library people and library kids, because they say, Mr. Mychal, how do I get on YouTube like you? And I say, I'm barely on YouTube. I'm trying to get on YouTube. But for me, I don't like social media stardom. I've never wanted to be the center of attention. That's why I try to become a librarian. I just want to talk to people about books and libraries and TV shows and so much more. But at the same time, I'm also very happy for my level of social media fame, if you can call it that, because so many people seem to be getting library cards. They seem to be going to their local libraries. So as much as me and my anxiety are not the biggest fan of being somewhat well known, of being spotted in the airport, I love what it's done for libraries and library cards. I love the friendships I've made along the way. How about you and your rise to social media stardom?
It's definitely been a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I also have anxiety. I've gone from getting hives whenever I would kind of look at the comment section. This was like years and years ago, to now I'm able to kind of like plug in and plug out like whenever I need to. And I really just like the creative aspects of social media, especially when it comes to making my videos on Smarter in Seconds. I love the jingles. We have a jingle for Thoughts About Feelings. And again, Katie Cronin made both of those jingles, and we have Brian Binion on the one for today. But I just like getting into the production aspect of it. I always think about my grandpa and how he always wanted to be, a movie maker, but he worked on an assembly line for an aircraft manufacturer. And back in those days, you couldn't really like switch careers like that. And I think it's really cool how if I want to make PSAs one day, I can do that. If we want to launch a podcast, we can do that. And we have a lot more flexibility. At the same time, I think sometimes people get a little bit too bold and brave when it comes to the comment section, when maybe they could redirect that energy towards their elected officials and all the things that are going on in the world. We could use our thoughts about feelings there. But for the most part, I really love what I've been able to do with Smarter in Seconds. I love how we've been able to connect and do things like Library After Revolution Day and just do so many things I never thought I would do ever. And I think the best part is I was always the talkative kid growing up. No surprise. And I don't know if I don't like being the center of attention. I won't, maybe I'll be like left aligned or right aligned in the margins. I could also do that. No, but I think that I don't know. It's just been really, I think, vindicating to be heard in a way that I wasn't really heard when I was growing up. Nice. And I think that's so important when it comes to like talking about who we are today, I have this theory that who we are today matches up with whatever we were made fun of for growing up. So I'm dying to know what that was for you. If you weren't made fun of growing up, that's great. Definitely don't want to, encourage that. But hey, it's good for the plot,
It is very good for the plot. I love it. I echo your thoughts. People should not be made fun of. That's the goal. Try not to make fun of people. Alas, I was made fun of as a child, but I think it's very hard for me to talk about because I was homeschooled by my mom until I was a senior in high school. So I was homeschooled from kindergarten through high school up till senior year. So in a way, unfortunately, my neighbors and my closest friends were inadvertently my first bullies, the first people who kind of who made fun of me, who worked on the dozens. So I kind of grew up in a culture where that was kind of like the love language, for lack of a better phrase, is making fun of one another, kind of throwing jokes out there.
Yo mama jokes, clapbacks.
Exactly.
I mean, if y'all don't know about dozens, it's like literally a game within the Black community where it's just like it's kind of like banter, I think is what they would call it today.
Exactly.
And that's why, I don't know if you remember that hashtag Thanksgiving clapback, that's because we were kind of raised comedians.
Yes, exactly. No, it really is. And I think for me to finally answer your question, I think what I was made fun of was for essentially being called weird, being the weird kid. That's why I'm such a big fan. That's why I love being friends with a person named Tony Weaver Jr., an incredible author, graphic novel person. So I very much relate to people who are weird. I love weirdos. I love the weird kids because that's who I was. I would be playing video games, and I was that kid making noises while playing video games, always making weird movements, which I'm currently on a journey to see if that was really just me possibly being autistic. So all those various things were components of me being the weird kid, and that's what I was made fun of for. And I think it hurt as a kid. I don't think it hurt. I didn't realize it hurt as much as it did when I was a kid, looking back now as an adult. But at the same time, it's made me who I am, and I've had talks with the people who kind of made fun of me when I was a kid, and now we're closer than ever. And then same question for you. It sounds like maybe that happened to you since it's such a strong question for you.
Definitely. I mean, the thing that's just, there's so much overlap, being talkative. Obviously, I talk now kind of for a living, which is clutch. But I was always called like random and weird. I wasn't homeschooled. I begged my mom to homeschool me, but she was like, I'm not in a position to do that. And so it was a conversation we'd had every year right when the school year would start, like in August. And once again, she'd be like, sorry, no. But the school I went to, I was the only Black girl except for my younger sister. And on the one hand, it kind of turned me into this show and tell queen because there was not a lot of curriculum that was around Black history, so like Black History Month, for example, but I had awesome teachers who were like, well, if you want to give the presentation. And so I was like, absolutely, yes. And so show and tell is my favorite thing. I would talk about, whether I talk about Motown and like Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye, or I talk about Diana Ross, or bring up people like Sojourner Truth when it was time to talk about Black History Month. And so my teachers really allowed me to just like spread my wings in that way. And Smarter in Seconds is nothing but a glorified show and tell show. But I think for me too, I didn't realize how hurtful it was actually until I was watching the film by Ava DuVernay, Origin. And I don't want to give it away, but there's a really compelling scene where there's a young Black boy and he's being ostracized from his white classmates. Yeah. And I actually might even get emotional talking about that scene because I was watching the film, I was at a screening, and I was like just sitting there in the theater, and I realized I'm not just crying for the kid in the movie, and the real person he's based on, but I'm crying for like my younger self, because there were times where like I would always invite everybody to my birthday party, but I was not really invited to anybody else's birthday party. And so it made me learn how to be really comfortable with myself. And I think the other like kind of saving grace about that, we're talking about neurodiversity, having ADHD, I was just kind of like, okay, well, the good thing is I never really felt like there was anything wrong with me. I was like, well, clearly everybody's busy, that type of vibe where I'm like, oh, well, perhaps there's some other reason. And my parents were always really supportive. My younger sister too, with having my back. My younger sister, Chelsea, is autistic. And I remember we were talking in like middle school or maybe high school, and I was like complaining about like, oh, I'm not getting invited to this, I'm not getting invited to that. And Chelsea was like, well, why would you want to go if they don't want you around? And I was like, well, and I feel like that rewired my brain. And I was like, yeah, why would I want to be around if I'm not wanted? And so I kind of just dove deeper into myself. Bringing up, Tony Weaver Jr.'s book, Weirdo, has been so cathartic, reading through that amazing book and just feeling like you're not the only one out there. And I think that's a good thing about social media is that it can help us find the other weirdos, the other random kids out there, and realize that we're not alone. And I think that's so important because as I have my thoughts about feelings about kind of being isolated or bullied or whatever, I just remember, and I tell other people, especially young folks, like, you're going to find your people. It's inevitable. You will find them. Sometimes if you're in a situation where you're isolated or you don't have a lot of friends, it's not because you're unlovable. That's never true. Yes. It's because you haven't found your people yet, and you will.
You will. No, you totally will. All your people are out there. That's why I'm such a big proponent of the library. The library is the one place where you can just come and you can just be. You can just exist as you are. You can be unhoused. You can be mentally ill. You can be a loud extrovert. You can be a quiet introvert. You don't even have to have a library card. I love when people come into the library, and it's my favorite library joke because they flash the library card at us library workers like it's Costco, and we're like, we don't need to see your library card, but thank you for coming on in. And just I think the library is so representative of the world. I think that's why you and I have connected. It's so representative of the community, of our neighbors, of Mr. Rogers, and that's just how we get to be a part of a community of people. And I know that you have something brewing with the Jim Henson production.
Yes. So I was so blessed last year. So Hallie from the Jim Henson team sent me a DM, and it was like a few years ago, and it was like, "Hey, my name's Hallie Stanford. I work with Jim Henson Company. I love what you do with Smarter in Seconds. I love to do something out." And so usually people reach out to you, and it's something that like feels like that big of a moonshot. I always recommend just like go to LinkedIn, double check, make sure it's not a scam, whatever. I didn't do any of that. I was like, yes, you need my social security number. Let's go. Because I think, yes, we're adding Jim Henson to the list as well. Like somebody who was such a and Lisa Henson, his daughter's so amazing. And she's one of the producers on the project that I'm working on. But it's just a dream come true. Like with the internet, like I think with Smarter in Seconds, I was just like, okay, I can talk fast and I can teach people about things. I'm going to do that on the internet. And then for somebody to like see that and then also be like, hey, can we take this to another level? Can we do something else with this? And so I worked with so many different folks. My creative director, Kat Wheeler, directed the pilot. Liz McGee was the writer on the pilot. Hallie Stanford and Lisa Henson are the producers. And I don't think I can name the name of the show, but we made a pilot, and I'm just so excited about it because, and that's actually why I reached out to you in the first place. My friend Kaylin had seen the video of you kind of where I think folks were being really terrible online towards you and was like, you should get in touch with this guy. Kaylin was also the person who decided to photograph me in the Geordie LaForge cosplay, and then it went totally viral. So Kaylin has good ideas. Shout out to Kaylin. Y'all need a photographer in the Los Angeles area. There's Kaylin Borowski. He's great. But anyway, and so when I decided to reach out to you, it was like, well, I'm going to be playing a librarian. I should get in touch with like a real librarian. And I just also wanted to be friends with you. And so that kind of led into us being friends, me kind of learning more about library sciences and how powerful libraries can be. And so we developed this show, and we have a pilot. And I think that the thing about TV development that you don't really think about, I'm from Los Angeles and I was a child actor, but I didn't realize how many years and months and weeks and how much time goes into developing something, even when it comes to this podcast, which we have thanks to Ninth Planet Studio, thank you very much, is thinking about like there's the strike, so that put things on pause. Yes. The writing strike put things on pause. You have to pitch, a lot of rejection. People ask me sometimes in LA, are you an actor? I'm like, yeah, I guess so, because it's really special and not common that you kind of just exist in the world and then somebody's like, will you be in this thing? And so I think now we're just kind of pitching out this show, and I think it's just what people really need, like helping to not just reach like little kids, like the preschool age, not just reaching the adults, but those folks who are in the middle, like the teenagers, yes. The folks who are figuring out, okay, I want to do this club at school, one of my friends don't. Is everything falling apart? Do my friends hate me? And just helping people learn to be more of themselves. And so I was able to create that project, the Jim Henson Company. I hope it comes, into a reality one day. But even if it didn't, it taught me so much about myself. And I think the biggest thing that it taught me and what social media and the opportunities I've had just continues to teach me that actually I'm somebody who could do this too. That I can be who I am with all my identities and my intersectionalities and still do things that maybe I didn't even realize I thought were out of reach for me. Wow. And so I think, being able to work with the Jim Henson Company on that was just a lot for my soul. And then also, hopefully it'll happen. But again, it was just, I think it's one of those things when it comes to TV is that you have to be grateful for every step of the way. But I've also seen you. I want to ask you about what you're doing with PBS. You did a collaboration with Arthur. Talk to us all about that, because I saw folks, and I was one of the people who was tagging PBS in your comment section on TikTok and on Instagram, and then it suddenly happened.
You know what? It's so crazy. But first of all, I'm so thankful to you. I'm so thankful for Smarter in Seconds. I have a Smarter in Seconds keychain. That's how much I love you and everything that you do with your show. I love it so much because I love the way that you and your team, and with Kat and directing and producing and writing it, just the way that you're able to reach people and talk to people about so many different things, so many things that people are afraid to talk about. You're able to just condense the information into 60 to 90 seconds, sometimes 2 minutes if it's that powerful of a topic. And I just love how people respond, and they're just like, I had no idea about any of this. And then they say, can you do a Smart in Seconds about this? What about this? And you're like, okay.
I'll
and
try.
you have all these things that you're trying to introduce to them. So I think because of that, because of what you do, is why Jim Henson's team probably reached out. The Kermit's best friend.
Yes.
And I'm so excited. I also hope it happens. I cannot wait to see the episode. I'm so glad that you reached out to me. But for me and PBS, again, I was a PBS kid, but I never thought I would see myself on PBS's social media channels. I saw all the comments on TikTok and Instagram and social media of people saying, I hope that Mychal does something with PBS. PBS, what are you waiting for? And neither myself nor PBS knew what to do with the comments. That's why we didn't respond. When PBS reached out to me, they said, we saw all the comments. So they saw all your comments, but it was just saying, Mychal, I'm so sorry. We've seen the comments. We just don't know what to do with you. And I was like, that's very real, because I just didn't know how to approach you, because I also didn't know what it would look like. But now we're just talking about library recommendations. We're encouraging library kids, library grown-ups to go get a library card, to be like Daniel Tiger, to be like all these other characters. We're sharing book recommendations for kindergarten, for first grade, for second grade, for fourth grade, for eighth grade, for everybody. And it's such a fun partnership. They're so kind. The PBS people are exactly who you think they would be. They're very patient. They're very cognizant of my anxiety, of my depression, and so much more. And they're like, you have a deadline, but take your time. So I'm so thankful that they do that. And then the collaboration with Arthur Reed and GBH is probably one of the coolest things I've ever gotten to do, because of social media, because of libraries. I have Arthur Reed's library card tattooed on me. That's how much I love Arthur Reed. And it just the coolest thing ever, talking with Arthur Reed about library cards, about so much more. They had said, do you want to film with the kid who plays Arthur Reed? And I was like, absolutely not. I do not ruin the magic of Arthur Reed for me. I just want to envision Arthur Reed forever. And I love it so much. I love that my little cousins, my 7-year-old and 4-year-old cousin, got to see me having a conversation with Arthur Reed. And it's just so special for a person who's had a library card for so long to be able to partner with PBS, to partner with Arthur Reed. And I'll love it for as long as I'm living.
Oh, I love that. And it'll be a long time that you're living, inshallah. When I saw it, I literally looked at my phone. I think that Kat and I were working that day. And it was like, I just screamed, and it was probably quite loud, because I was so excited. It was just to see it go. And I think that's why, there's so many thoughts about feelings that people have for rejection, for putting yourself out there. Yes. But I think that we've both demonstrated that, if you do that and you have a good team and you have good intentions, and it doesn't always work out. That's true. But at the same time, you don't really lose anything. Was it Michael Jordan? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take?
That sounds like a Michael Jordan quote. I'm not too sure, but I'm sure.
I'm not even sure if that's
I'm sure you would
quote.
agree to it.
Yeah, but I think that
fact check.
I know. Maybe I'll fact check while we're offline and come back for that. But I think that it's just it's so important to just try to put yourself out there, see what things can happen, because if you don't, then you kind of live your life not knowing. So right now, the situation that I'm in with the Jim Henson company is we have some pitches out. We've gotten some no's. We've gotten some maybes, but not right now. But you can't get caught up on those steps. And I think that one, it was just cool that people were and I was one of them who was yes, we have to see Mychal on PBS, and then PBS and for you that meeting, that's an accomplishment too.
Yes.
For then you to then film the first one. And my favorite is when you two are waving back and forth. But I think not only has Arthur become such a meme, that was such an important show too, because it taught you hey, if you're a picky eater, that's fine. If you're a loud kid who says really random insightful things like DW, that's also okay. You can have a friend group that look like all these different things. You can have a friend who's an anteater and that doesn't really look like an anteater, and then a friend who's a bunny, and even dealing with like strict teachers and like Mr. Ratburn. And I think they've also, I don't know, I could just talk about Arthur for days, which is fine. But there's this one episode, I think Letters from Buster, where they wanted to show a couple that was a same gender couple, and they've had similar, difficulties trying to depict that with Mr. Ratburn. But what I love about the creators of Arthur and PBS is that they show up. And I think that's really important when it comes to representation and getting those voices out there. And that's what I try to do with Smarter in Seconds. But I want to shout you out, since you so kindly gave me those affirmations. I love that when I go to your page and I'm looking at things, and I'm just like, sometimes you just pop up in the Explore and it's just like, hi, I'm Mychal. There was even somebody who dressed up as you and like tried to, mimic your mannerisms, but it's just so effervescent. And I think not sometimes, all the time, you're telling people what they need to hear in order to be able to stick around. And you're so transparent about your mental health struggles and the medication you're on. It's also made me feel like I could do that too, because there's so much stigma where I was told in my professional career, don't talk about being on medication, don't talk about this. But I am. And there are so many other people who are too. Do you want to talk about that too?
I would love to. Yeah, you know what? I think I haven't talked about it in too much detail. I mean, I think I talk about my mental health struggles all the time. I talk about being diagnosed with anxiety, with panic disorder, with nightmare disorder, with depression, and with PTSD. I never go into too much detail about it. I think recently I've started talking about it more on social media, mainly because library kids will come up to me in Costco. They'll come up to me at the grocery store, at the gas station, in the airport, at sports games, and they'll talk about their own anxiety. They talk about what's going on in their own lives. So I made a conscious effort to be more open about it very recently, hoping that it will reach them, it'll show them that they're not alone. I think that's the biggest way that we can talk about thoughts, about feelings, is just like we're doing right now, is saying you're not alone. That's essentially why you and I are such close friends, is just trying to support one another in these unprecedented times, in these tiring times. And I think that's just been very hard for me as a library person. It's the reason I left the library. I'm no longer a practicing librarian. I'll always be a librarian. I still pay my student loans, so I'm a librarian until those bad boys are paid off. But I left because I was struggling so much with my mental health. A lot of people think that it's because of those trolling comments that were made online. I think I addressed 2 of them, but there've been so many more in my social media life. I've been on social media for almost 20 years. And I only addressed those 2 specific ones, talking about me having dark energy, and the person who kind of just made fun of library people and just kind of basically called them like the worst people of all time, people who represent the library, people who can read, all those awful things. So I only addressed those 2 because I knew that library kids came across those comments. So I was like, you know what, they may want to know who the local library, they may want to know what I'm saying about those comments. So they were very, very, very hurtful. But I left the library because I was just struggling quite a bit. I was struggling being a supervisor. I went from being a shelver to being a supervising librarian. It was very stressful. It was hard trying to keep my library staff safe and trying to keep the library users safe. There's so much that happens in the library world that people have no idea about what goes on. They don't realize how many people come into the library, because the library is one of the last third spaces in the world. You can be in-house, you can be mentally ill, but unfortunately that means that sometimes people have their worst day when they come into the library. They take it out on library staff. They verbally abuse us, and sometimes they will physically assault us, or they will do other various things of that nature, and it can take a lot out of you. And I, as a person in charge, had to tell people a lot of times, today is not a library day. Maybe you can try again tomorrow. And I'd have to suspend those people, and they would be very upset with me. They threatened my life on several occasions. It got so bad at certain times that when they were threatening my life, that my library staff did not allow me to leave the library by myself. So I was dealing with all of that. People in my family were sick. My grandparents were getting sicker. My parents were sick. My siblings were struggling in their own life, and then I was struggling with my litany of mental health diagnoses. So I left the library on March 1st of 2024. I started working in libraries November of 2013, and I left March 1st, 2024. So almost 11 years. But what a lot of people don't know, which is very hard to talk about, I think this might be the first time that I've verbally spoken about it, is I left the library on March 1st, 2024, and it was my intention to leave the world, to take my own life the following day, on March 2nd, 2024. But now here we are in 2025, and I'm still alive. So I'm very happy. I've come a long way, but I'm a person who has struggled mightily in my life. I'm also a person who has not wanted to be in the world, and I didn't want to leave the world because I felt unloved. I felt very loved. Honestly, being people's kind comments, including yours, and so many other library kids and library grown-ups. I think when I left the library, I got close to like 15 bouquets of flowers sent to the library when I left. But I just didn't like myself very much. It just was very, very painful to be alive, to live with my anxiety, and I just got very close to not being able to handle all that pain and all the struggles. So I thought, you know what, I'll leave the world. I never made a conscious plan. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I did actually write a letter to my mom saying goodbye, which she's never read. No one has ever read it because they haven't had to. But now I've worked very hard, and here we are talking about thoughts about feelings, and I've come all that way talking about mental health, and I've just made it my mission to show people that they should stay in the world. I hope that they stay. I don't know what the reason will be. I've had so many reasons. Our friendship is one reason. The library kids asking me questions about my tattoos, asking me how I get my hair the way that it is. So many other things. My silly cats, Machine Gun Kitty and Kissing Cat Barlow, are probably some of my biggest reasons to stay in the world. And again, just trying to remind people that it's okay to not be okay. And I do hope that they keep on pushing on. And I still have a lot of hard days. I've never had 24 straight hours of being happy, of being joyful. But I've come close a couple of times, and I think it's reason enough to stay for me is to keep on seeing if I can ever have a day of 24 straight hours of sleep. I honestly think that's the reason that I suffer from nightmare disorder and sleeping problems, is so that one day I can have those 24 consecutive hours of joy.
Yeah. Can I give you a hug?
Absolutely.
So the mics. I'm glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here. Most days. Today, I'm very glad to be here.
So, since we're sharing, I think it's so brave and important to talk about the days that we don't want to continue living, because I also had that.
Yeah.
I don't remember what year it was, which I think is sometimes a good thing, because then you stop thinking about, I'm a historian, right? So I'm usually good with dates, but sometimes there's dates you want to forget. And I think too, I was so kind of ashamed, but seeing you talk about it really, I think that's what this show is going to be about. I think Thoughts About Feelings is going to be what maybe you can listen to in the times where you don't want to be around anymore. Because we're doing it, we're living, and I think that every day that we're alive is something that for a lot of folks, it's an active choice you have to make. And I think for me, when I was in the place where I didn't want to be around anymore, it was the day that I got canceled on Twitter. And I've been told by so many folks, I actually used to work in celebrity PR. And so it's like breaking all the rules to talk about it again, right? It was so many years ago, nobody remembers that anyway. But I think it's important because when we leave mean, nasty comments and we make speculations about people's lives, I think sometimes it leaves, for the person who's writing it, it just stays there. But for a lot of people, it feels like an indictment on your character. It feels like everything that you love and you know is crumbling apart, and the person that you tried to show the world that you are, that was being taken away. And that's how I felt. And so talk about diagnosis. So I have ADHD. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 8 years old. And I actually, my younger sister, Chelsea, she was not speaking at the time. So she was not, I think the technical term is nonverbal and autistic, but she wasn't diagnosed yet. What I remember was going into the doctor's office a lot with my mom, and then the doctor just telling my mom that she's like a bad mom. And, you know, it was the 90s. Sexism. It's still that way in many cases. A lot of, like, I think the term's medical gaslighting. But I remember when we finally got to this awesome psychiatrist, Dr. Skip Baker, who I still see, even though he's a pediatric psychiatrist, I refuse to go to a different person. I was like, hey, I can't tell time. I can't, like, there's just so many things I couldn't do. I couldn't read. And I didn't read well probably until I was like 10 years old, but I would memorize the books. My mom would read me the book in the evening time, and then I would memorize it. And then when I went to school the next day, I would just recite what I remembered. And that comes in a clutch with Smarter in Seconds when I'm writing the scripts. But it was like, I felt like there was a lot of hiding I had to do. And then that was also the anxiety that I had. And I had a lot of rage, and I didn't really know where to put it, especially because I had the like, baggage of being called like, you know, the angry black girl. And I was always being told to smile. And so now I'm a smiley person, but I also kind of feel like, even in talking about this, like, what if people know that I didn't want to be here anymore? What if people know that I'm not always happy? What if people know that I was problematic too? And what I found time and time again is that when I reveal those things, people are pretty chill. People are pretty gracious. But the day that I didn't want to be around anymore, the night before, I probably had the best night of my life. I went out with some friends who were like huge, like Instagrammers with like, you know, like multi-million followers. And I felt like such a celebrity. I felt like this is the most important I'm ever going to feel. This is the best I'm ever going to feel. Because at that time, I put so much stock into, this is like 2018. I think my book had just come out. Like, I put so much stock into the like idea that who I was connected to how visible I was and how much people liked me, which, if you're that type of person where you feel like how much people like you is your self-worth, we have to unlearn that. It's not sustainable. You'll end up like how I almost did, because you can live by it, but you can also end up not living by it. And that almost happened. And so that same day, I have anxiety. I also have a panic disorder. I used to work at Planned Parenthood, and when I worked there, I had a lot of visibility on the one hand, but then I also had so much work that I was doing behind the scenes that I still can't talk about because, like HIPAA, and, there's so much sensitive information around it. But being a visible Muslim woman who worked at Planned Parenthood, who was also a Black woman and queer, there's a lot of like intersections of those things that people don't like. And I just felt like and my job, I would just get all types of hate all the time. And there was like so many different things. And a lot of folks who are journalists, who are, visible people, have to sometimes involve law enforcement or the FBI when it comes to those things. And when I was working at Planned Parenthood, that was the case. Oftentimes, because we would have people show up to the office. I was traveling a lot in the rural South by myself, which is part of the job, which I was so happy to do. But it was also really scary when I would have people who, hacked my accounts and could find where my location was and all those types of things. And so one day on Twitter, I decided to talk all about that. I decided to talk about how, what it was like to be a Muslim woman who's a Black woman and have to, go to the FBI. And the way that the internet is, that turned into Blair is an FBI informant and we shouldn't trust her and we should have never trusted her. And in hindsight, it feels so silly. And I like saying it out loud, and like there's like one person who's really dedicated to that, kind of conspiracy theory about me, who actually used to be my really close friend. And, she'll kind of like pop up every few years, every now and again, and be like, I'm going to destroy you. And I'm like, and I feel like it's kind of been this cloud over my head for such a long time. Like, no, I was never an FBI informant. In hindsight, that feels like the most ridiculous conspiracy theory. All I wanted to do was to talk about how uncomfortable it is to simultaneously feel like that's the only place to go for safety, law enforcement, the FBI, etc., and then also feel like they are trying to use you. Like, there were so many questions I got about, well, do you ever hear this at the mosque? Like, just basically trying to use me for that reason. And I try to talk about those things. And at the time, I have this idea that my visibility is so connected to my self-worth, back when I was on the Twitter days. And then this idea that, these are my friends. These are the people who I know and love. I talk to these folks, like we send each other happy birthday messages, and I didn't have a lot of friends growing up. And so for me to have like the best night of my life, which also involved a lot of alcohol, which if I drink alcohol, I get really depressed the next day. So it's not advisable for me to drink it. And a lot of folks will be like, well, you're Muslim, you shouldn't drink it anyway. And I'm like, well, I'm also a human. So sometimes humans drink alcohol when they're not supposed to. And so it was the combination of my mental health, the alcohol, and then this feeling of everyone turning on me, people who I had like worked with, people who I felt like knew and loved me, the next day deciding that I was an FBI informant that was going to make them unsafe. And I just was like, I don't know what to do. And so instead of trying to do anything to myself, I just talked to my parents. Both my parents work in mental health, and they just drove me straight to inpatient care. And when I decided to make a post of saying like, hey, I'm checking myself into the hospital, there were even people who were like, she's weaponizing her mental health against this. And at the time, it felt like the biggest deal in the world. It felt like I was never going to come back from it. And it also felt like I couldn't even think about whether I liked myself or what next steps. I just felt like everything that people know about me is now this worst thing ever that's not even true. And so I've actually gone, I think that might have been 2018 or 2017. I think it was 2018. I've just gone all this time never even talking about it because I was just hoping nobody would remember, you know, and a lot of people don't remember. There might be some people who do, especially that one lady. But it just really feels freeing because it's really hard when you have just a bunch of people piling onto you, making conspiracy theories up about you. And then when you're like, hey, I can't do this anymore. You're making me not want to be here anymore. For people to be like, she's lying. And so there's so many folks who I so badly want to get back in touch with, people who like blocked me or stopped talking to me, and I've been able to like rebuild. But I think now when I deleted my Twitter, then I end up going viral on Instagram. And not a lot of people know this kind of background story. And so I think it's a huge reason why I'm so sensitive when it comes to social media. But social media is great, but at the same time, it almost ended me. And I think that when we're being kind to people and we're being thoughtful towards people, and even when we're trying to correct folks or we're caught up in our own concerns and anxieties, like I've done a lot of therapy realizing, okay, well, it was really scary for people to see somebody who was involved in the Black Lives Matter movement talking about the FBI, especially with the context of COINTELPRO. Like, you know, I understand that a lot of what I received was people's anxieties and fears that I was going to make them unsafe and all that. But at the same time, it just felt like, okay, I'll just never talk about this again and it'll go away. But it feels better to talk about, and I'd want to be here. And there was a lot of years, you know, I felt so grateful that my parents were able to both take me. We're literally sitting in the intake room with, you know, we're kind of in this like very safe environment. There weren't pillows on the walls like you see in a lot of films, but, you know, they took all the stuff away from me, like, you know, like any rings that I had, like shoelaces, they'll take all those stuff. And I'm sitting on my dad's lap and my mom's in the room and we're talking about like, you know, the ideation I was having and stuff. And in the funniest turn of events in the world, the next day I have the psychiatrist or like the therapist who's sitting there in the room, and I'm telling him why I'm in there, and I'm laughing because you'll find out why I'm laughing in a minute, but I'm telling him why I'm in there, and I'm like telling him about how it involves social media and my followers, and I don't think I even said Twitter. I said this is like my followers think that I'm an FBI informant and the FBI and da da da, and the guy I think heard the word FBI and was like, okay, sweetie, you're having a delusion. And so he starts explaining delusions to me, which are real. I mean, like delusions are like a real thing. And I was just like, oh, no. He thinks maybe perhaps I'm not in reality with him or in our shared reality.
Okay.
And so he was getting ready to talk about how long they were going to keep me and the medications they were going to put me on. And I was like, can you just Google me? And he was like, okay, sure. Thinking he's not going to look anything up or find me. And so he takes his phone, he looks it up, you know, Blair, whatever. And I was like, oh, well, I apologize. And he said it was like the first time in his 20 years of being a therapist that somebody in the mental hospital had mentioned the FBI and was serious. And I was like, that you know of. But
cross it off the list.
I know, right? And so I think that it's hard with social media when you have your darkest day and your darkest moment broadcast to the world and people believing the worst things about you. But it's also, I think, a really beautiful thing to be able to live long enough to be able to talk about it and to be in a much better place with it. So I thank you for the opportunity to be able to share that. Feels a lot better.
Oh, I appreciate you. Now I have to give you a hug. Just a show full of hugs.
I know, right? Well, now that I feel like folks have gotten to know us better and the stuff that they don't see on social media, but instead behind the scenes, I want to talk about how we have decided to self-fund this series, and at least for the first season, so that way it sticks to our vision and work just directly with Nine Planet Studios. But we do have some non-sponsor sponsors. And what do I mean by that? I mean that this episode is brought to you by taking a deep breath.
Let's take a deep breath together. 1, 2, 3. And one more. 1, 2, 3.
Thoughts About Feelings was brought to you by taking a deep breath. Now, don't you feel better? I do. And I'm sure folks want to know how we ended up becoming friends. Should we tell them?
I would love to. I think if you want to start, since you were the one who was kind enough to reach out to me and my introverted self first.
Oh, wow. So one thing about me, if I follow somebody or they follow me back, I'm going to send them a DM because I'm like, clearly you want to be in touch. And that's led me to some amazing things, and it almost always works. But my friend Kaylin Borowski, who's an amazing photographer and image creator in Los Angeles, he always has great ideas. And he saw a video of you where you were, I think, maybe responding or talking about some of the hate that you get. And he's kind of been friends with me for a long time, even through what I just talked about. And he was like, you should reach out to him. I feel like he could, use like some friendship, and I love friends. And so I reached out to you, and I think I said something like, hi, my name is Blair. I'd like to be friends with you. And you responded.
Absolutely. No, I did not know that part, actually. I'm so glad that he suggested that you become my friend. He was so right. I did need a friend. I feel like I always need friends. I mean, I think as adults, it's very hard to make friends. As a kid, it's a bit easier, it seems, to make friends, even though mental health is an everyone problem. It's a kid problem, it's a teen problem, and it's an adult problem. So it is hard for some kids to make friends, but it's easier to say, you like Paw Patrol, you like Dogman, you like Spider-Man, let's be friends, and that's it. Whereas adults, we would have a lot more pressure on ourselves. So I'm glad that you had the courage to reach out to me, and I would just like, a person wants to be friends. I would love to be friends, and we really have just continued this relationship via social media, via texting, and I love it so much. I love learning from you about all the things you talk about on Smarter in Seconds. I love that you appreciate and support library cards and libraries and library joys so much, and it's just been so much fun. I think a lot of people think that you and I have been friends forever, which is what it feels like. But I think that's just the beauty of a genuine friendship.
With your permission, I posted our first chat together, and people were so excited that we had met. There were people, again, with people tagging PBS, or people like, Blair, you should talk to Mychal. Mychal, you should talk to Blair. And so it was like the crossover that everybody got to see, which I think is a really fun aspect of social media that we see nowadays. It's like, oh my gosh, they know each other. How cool. But especially now that I posted that picture of us as kids that I kind of edited together, people think that we're childhood friends.
Yes.
And I like that version of events, because I would have had more friends growing up.
No, and I think it's true. I think deep down, you and I definitely would have been friends as kids, and I think that is what people love to see. It is kind of like breaking the wall of friendship, breaking the wall of social media, where they're like, oh, I watch this person on social media, I watch this person on my phone and my tablet, and I also watch this person, and now they're together in the same space. How is this happening?
Absolutely.
What is going on in the world? And just like, yes, that's what should happen. All the things that you love should come together, and I like that in a way. That's what you and I have done by becoming very close friends.
Absolutely. And we've done awesome things like Library After Revolution Day, and now Thoughts About Feelings. With every Thoughts About Feelings episode, we're going to have questions from library kids, which was your idea.
Yeah, I love library kids because they have so many questions, so many genuine questions. Library kids are pretty much just like walking intrusive thoughts, and they love asking questions that pop into their head. And for me, one of my favorite ones that they ask when I go to school libraries and I visit public libraries, when I would do story time, is I'm from California, so they often ask, what is your in and out order? And I'm a person who, I love in and out, and I love when kids are just like, that's their instinctual question. I don't even mention in and out, and they just say, I have a question. After the kids talk about their favorite books, how old they are, they're like, Mr. Mychal, what is your in and out order? And for me, it's often been, I get 2 doubles. If I'm going to eat at In-N-Out, I have the fries. If I have to go have it to go, I don't get the fries. They just get too cold for my liking in the drive home, and then I get a Neapolitan shake.
Ooh,
do you have a go-to in and out order if a library kid were to ask?
Absolutely. I'm also from California, from Pasadena, raised in Altadena, moved to Pasadena, and then moved to the San Gabriel Valley. So it's just like boop, boop, boop. And I love In-N-Out. It was a special day. So I have a chronic illness. I have thyroid disorder. And so when I would have to go to the hospital, to the doctor, which was all the time, it felt like all the time. I was like, every 3 months I had to get blood work done. And so my mom had to take me out of school. And the thing would be so cool when I came back at lunchtime and I had In-N-Out, it made me cool again.
Nice.
I was like, oh man, Blair went to In-N-Out.
Badge of honor.
And so suddenly, now that I'm in my 30s, I have more allergies, so I can't eat cheese anymore. It used to be a cheeseburger, but now it's just a regular burger. Hey. And I get it burger animal style with no cheese, and then I get fries animal style with no cheese, which is just the spread and the onions. And I get the fries regardless. I don't care how cold they get, how stale and crunchy they get. I love the fries, and it needs to be a complete meal. And then I get a lemon up, which is the pink lemon up, which is the pink lemonade and 7-Up. Were you also very interested in the secret menu In-N-Out when you were growing up? Because I was.
I very much was once I first found out about it. I think I did a deep dive into Wikipedia, which is, I'm sure you've done Smarter in Seconds on Wikipedia deep dives.
I haven't. That's a great idea. We're adding that to the list immediately.
So I did that on the secret menu, but I am obsessed with the secret menu. I'm a big fan of the root beer flute from the secret menu.
That used to be my favorite thing when I could have dairy. but alas, no longer. This isn't sponsored by In-N-Out, but if they want to reach out, we'd be happy to have them in season 2. And I'm not a librarian, but I have been an educator in the past, and now I have my nieces and nephews living at home, and my little 5-year-old niece, she loves to ask me, again, being a little cute, little intrusive thought, and she always asks me, what am I wearing on my head?
Yes.
And so that's also a question that adults have, and sometimes the adults ask that question too, not so elegantly, but it's called a hijab. I'm Muslim, and I wear my hijab, my headscarf. It's not just a scarf, but it's also kind of like a way to practice modesty, and that's trying not to be too ostentatious, trying to give back to the community, being really intentional, being demure, if you will. You know, very mindful, very demure.
Very cutesy.
Exactly. Shout out to Jools Lebron for that amazing earworm. And I kind of also like to show my braids. I like to have my little baby hairs and my braids, and just kind of like show all aspects of myself and all aspects of my culture. Throughout this podcast, you might, see, or I guess hear me wearing a hat and having my braids out and not wearing a hijab in the way that you might have seen it on TV. But I think it's important to stay true to yourself and to do, especially when it comes to your beliefs and your practices and your spirituality or just your self-expression, to do what feels good and makes the most sense to you. And I'm still working on not feeling bad about the fact that sometimes people tell me I do it wrong or wear it wrong, but it feels right to me, and so that's what I have to do.
Man, well, thank you for that. That's so huge. I had no idea any about that, so I've learned so much. And thank you, library kids, for your library kid questions. I think we could all take a lesson from library kids, and just take hold of our feelings and ask questions that we think may seem silly. There are no stupid questions, and I think library kids show us how important it is to just ask questions so that we can learn more and more.
Absolutely. I think that could take us to our action item to round out the show.
Sounds great.
So I think this week's action item, as you listen to this podcast, is to maybe ask a question thoughtfully, or to maybe be curious in a way that you haven't been before. We have supercomputers at our literal fingertips. I know Mychal and I do right here. But to maybe get into those search engines, start making inquiries. If there's something that you want to know about, don't feel bad for asking it. Maybe find somebody who's volunteered themselves as an educator, whether that's Mychal when it comes to libraries and literacy, or me when it comes to sociology and social issues. But really just put yourself out there. Think about how maybe when I was growing up, I never really felt smart. But smartness and stupidity, all these things are kind of made up to keep people in a certain order. And we don't necessarily have to follow that order. We can be ourselves. We can be curious. We can be creative. So maybe ask a thoughtful question to someone in your life today, or to a search engine.
Yes. No, I couldn't say it better myself, and I would just follow up by saying, take a trip down to your local library, reach out to your friends. That's the beauty of having friends that we can talk about thoughts about feelings with, is we all know a little bit different things about one another, about things in life. And the beauty of local libraries is library people, we are here to help you find the answers to your questions. We don't know everything, but we do have Google at the tips of our fingers. We have access to books, and we are always happy to help you find answers and to help you address your thoughts about feelings. Thank you so much for taking part in this podcast with us. Thank you to Blair and Monty. Thank you to the library kids. Thank you to the library grown-ups. And special thank you to the Fairfield Cordelia Library for letting us film the podcast at their library today. So definitely be sure to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube and follow us on Instagram at Thoughts About Feelings Pod for all the latest updates.
We've got some thoughts about feelings. Think of the places we can go, and the people we'll meet, the things that we'll see. What do you think? Are you feeling me? Thoughts about feelings, all the ideas we can share with our fabulous friends, and Mychal and Blair. We'll think about our feelings everywhere with thoughts about feelings. Thoughts about feelings, yeah!